Welcome, everybody. This is the second episode with Gregory Mannarino. Last time we spoke was back in September the 20th, where the FOMC happened, the first rate cut after 4 years. Um, Today's episode, we're going to discuss about everything that's transpired, Gregory's outlook, and there's lots to discuss. I mean, we got Trump's inauguration, which is another theatrical performance, right? Got to keep on the news, the narratives flowing. But since then, we've seen higher unemployment, we've seen housing affordability drop, a lot of other exogenous factors. We have the Trump rally since his election. Where do you see us going in the next few months? Where do you think we are right now, and where do you think we're going? Because you touched on devaluation last time. Rates have been dropping, global rates, like you've mentioned in your episodes. How do you see the world right now? What do you think is going to transpire?
So we're going to continue to see, in fact, it's going to be more pronounced, a slowdown of the global economy, unfortunately. And a lot of this, I would have to say, the overriding factor here is the mechanism of artificially suppressed rates, subsequently currency purchasing power losses across the board around the world are going to accelerate. And as most people are probably completely unaware, except for people that follow our work, is this is an economic wrecking ball. So you can imagine that. I mean, you don't even have to imagine it. We're going to see more of the same, unfortunately, moving forward here. I think there's going to be a massive effort of central banks to continue to artificially suppress rates. You're going to hear the calls from so-called world leaders. Trump, one of his campaign promises was to lower rates here. Again, these puppets work obviously with their central bank respectively to foster a wealth transfer up to the 1% and 2%ers. The middle class always pays for it, unfortunately, and people just got to wake up. And I think the people that probably follow our work are well versed in what's happening, unfortunately or fortunately. I mean, but people just don't get it for the most part. But I mean, there's just no way out of this. Look, the goal is very simple. Central banks will be allowed to fulfill their end game, that is to buy it all, to inflate. And they're going to create any mechanism they can come up with here to allow that system, unfortunately, or that mechanism to continue to work against the people, and the people are going to continue to be lied to, deceived, and distracted across the board, placing their faith, unfortunately, in the wrong places. But this is, unfortunately, this is an elimination, and it's going to get a lot worse of the middle class here. This movement into a neo-feudalistic society globally is in full swing, and it's going to get more pronounced moving forward. I can't see another way out of it right now. But unfortunately, that's all you got to do is connect the dots. It's pretty simple.
Yeah. And last time we mentioned a little bit about the whole Bitcoin digital on-ramp into what is going to be the full digitalization of the economy. And we see this especially with the nominees and the people that have surrounded Trump, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, etc., all the PayPal founders. It's a little bit scary because you have the majority of people who are looking at their crypto portfolio and feeling wealthier, but then you look around and you see, I don't see how this is sustainable, and I'm surprised. I mean, we knew that there was a lot of money that was pushed around, especially with the whole COVID relief. But I'm looking around and I deal with a lot of small, medium-sized businesses here in Canada. Things are looking grim. Things are looking really grim. And I don't know how we can have a 180 turnaround. How are you finding things there in terms of when you're out in retail stores, people's consumption there? Because we hear a lot of the data from the government, which is all fake. It's all, it's all artificial to prop up this narrative. But how are you seeing on the ground the people there in the States? I think you're in Nevada, or
It's in Florida.
You're in Florida now.
Nevada,
Okay.
going on 2 years ago now. But the situation is bad. It's across the board, and people continue. It's almost like it's a disease. They are continue to borrow themselves into obscurity, living well above their means, and they don't understand. I think the real issue is people don't understand why things are the way they are because they're being distracted. I mean, here's a clear example of that. You turn on the mainstream media here in the United States, and you're hearing about dollar strength, dollar strength, dollar strength. All they're talking about is comparative strength, but it's a deception. It's not it's absolute purchasing power. So people in the United States are like they've been duped. They're like, oh well, the dollar's getting stronger. The dollar is not getting stronger on an absolute strength basis. It's being dissolved, and that mechanism around the world everywhere is going to continue moving forward as central banks fulfill their goal to again this new system here, which is being ushered in, this crypto system being promised by the crypto president Trump himself, of course, is nothing but a bridge to what everyone knows is coming. And you outlined it just prior to this, is this tokenized system. Everyone knows it's coming. Everybody knows it, but there's no pushback. And I think, especially here in the United States, people they really here. I can tell you what's happening here in the United States. I don't know if this is what you're seeing over there, but we are a conquered society here. We've been divided to the max, and henceforth we are conquered. People can't think for themselves. They rely on others as some kind of a safety net. Trump is being portrayed as some kind of a savior deity. It's not going to happen. Unfortunately, he's playing right into the plan of central banks. That is to issue in this new system, quite obviously, and calling for lower rates. I mean, a promise that he can't even keep. It's an astonishing thing how dumb politicians believe the people are. When Trump said during the campaign that he was going to bring them lower rates, he has no ability to do that. He doesn't have a printing press behind the Resolute desk, nor does he have ability to buy debt. But making a promise like that is actually admitting to the people, hey, look, I'm going to work closely with the Federal Reserve. In this case, we're talking about the Fed, but every central bank is the same boat. Well, we don't have a single politician with enough guts really to push back against these institutions because they're in full control. They are pulling the strings. They are the puppet masters. Yeah. And unfortunately, we the people are paying the price for that. And I think, honestly, and I've been telling people this since the end of last year, that I think global currency devaluation is going to, it has to, in order to keep the system afloat, accelerate moving forward, which means people are going to be caused to suffer more so. So what does that mean? What it really comes down to is, what is the solution to the problem? First of all, we have to come up with our own solutions, and they're pretty simple. No politician is going to end central banking or anything like that. What we need to do is take advantage of everything that comes along our way. That means we have to play the game, getting involved in an asset which carries a lot of risk with it. I'm talking about cryptocurrencies here. We just found out, it was just today on CNBC, BlackRock has just gone all in on the Trump trade with regard to Bitcoin. I don't know if you caught that one, but I mean, look, where they're telling us what they're going to do before they do it, and that's what is going to happen. I think, unfortunately, people need to understand that this has now become a game of survival as the currency is being devalued and people are being strangled to death. If that means we have to take advantage of it that way, then we have to take risk. When people aren't in these markets because there's no risk, there's risk here. And with regard to the stock market, I pulled out 90%. At the last FOMC meeting, when we saw the 10-year yield spike, my indicator, the MMRI, deeply in the red. The market's trying to recover. We saw an interesting set of dynamics in play today. As a matter of fact, it's going on with global bond yields dropping, central banks buying more debt. They did the same thing just a couple of days ago as well. This mechanism can't stop. Is it going to work to prop up the markets? Maybe, but it's an economic wrecking ball, unfortunately.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Definitely the DXY, like you mentioned earlier, people get confused. It's the relative strength. Other currencies are collapsing much faster, being devalued much faster. We just so happen to be in the luckiest side of the planet where we still have.
It's going to change, obviously, but you're 100% right. That's the deception. It's everyone look over here. Don't look over there. It's what they always do. And it just, people don't understand it. And either they don't want to, understand it, or they just take somebody else's word for it without doing any research on their own. And that's what they count on. The misinformation campaign from politicians and everything else, which is a terrible game. But they rely on people not making even 2 minutes of effort to find out what is actually meant by, let's see, the relative strength of a currency. And this mechanism is going to continue until it doesn't. And I think there's a big move right now. In fact, it's pretty obvious. World de-dollarization here, BRICS nations banding together and gaining more power here. As we are bridged into a new system, unfortunately, I don't think we want to be tokenized, but unfortunately, we're going to get it. And that's a product of central banks. And central banks are never on our side. They have no fruit. There's nothing. They're good for nothing except for destruction of the economy and the people.
Mm-hmm. Now, given your outlook on the markets, for a long time you've been pro accumulation of commodities, and of course that's a safe bet. Given also the macro side of things, we see now that the Arctic is the next frontier of antagonism between the Russian, the Chinese, and the U.S. It's been for a long time, but now it seems to be gaining momentum. Which sectors do you see right now as a good opportunity? I know you can't give financial advice, but what is your keen eye observing right now when it comes to commodities?
For a moment, look at what you just said, because this is pretty profound here. There is a obvious race for resources. And that's really what this is going to come down to here. Commodities are real things. I think people need exposure here. I think there's a lot of danger right now, though, I mean, if you're looking for exposure, let's say via an exchange traded fund, an ETF, there's risk here. Right now, I think we need to see things change with regard to stock market dynamics, even though we understand the mechanism here. Like I said, I'm 90% out of this. I still think, people do need exposure, and I think the holding physical metals is probably an amazing way to continue to take advantage of that as a hedge, because we all understand how this is eventually going to work out. It's too simple to understand that we have a hyper bubble in this debt market that is the greatest threat to existence on this planet. We're going to face a resource problem. They know it. And not that the resources aren't there, but it's going to be the people's ability to acquire them, because the real issue isn't about a stock market crash or anything. It's about liquidity, and the world today is in a liquidity crisis as the debt-based system demands that more debt be pulled into the system just to function at its current level. But this must go on exponentially. So the issue here is, right now, the safest bet, in my view, to gain exposure to commodities would be to hold physical assets in your hand here, as opposed to, but yeah, if I were to see some dynamics change in the market, I think there are avenues that people can gain exposure to broad basket of commodities. I've advocated for this for a very, very long time. I just don't like the action here in the stock market. And we'll see where this goes. We do now have the most stock market friendly president, if you want to call it that. I don't think any of these things are human. Though they engage in devilism, as far as I'm concerned. But that's besides the point. So is he's going to? I think Trump is going to make sure that the Fed does keep rates lower. In fact, I believe as the economy craters faster, there is a great potential for negative rates, and he's a proponent of that. We've known this from his last tenure. So what does this mean? If the Fed keeps getting in here and keeping rates artificially suppressed, it could potentially boost the stock market as it wrecks the economy further here, destroys the purchasing power of the currency. So we need to see how this is going to play out. Right now, I'm not in a great position, meaning I'm in a pretty large cash position. I've been in this position now for a few weeks. I got to think about what I'm going to do here. I do believe I'm going to be putting more cash to work in XRP, in Bitcoin as well, and gaining more exposure to physical metals. I really think that's the way. But it's interesting to see what's happening here, the struggle for resources here. This is nothing new. I think we've seen this in the past. It's generally led to, unfortunately, more war. But again, I think people that follow our work are way ahead of the curve on all this, and it makes sense to people what they're seeing and why they're seeing it more importantly.
Hmm. Yeah, we're seeing that the statist coins, the XRPs, XLMs, all the and even Bitcoin is becoming one of those status coins where they're rallying because it has been announced for such a long time that it will be the transformation, that digital transformation. So you do see a potential bifurcation where you'll have the crowds will be left behind, right? Won't want to follow this whole digital transformation, and those who will have perhaps given up and have no other option but to follow this path, because let's be honest, there are already places where they don't accept cash. Like yesterday, for instance, I was at a new place, new cafe, busy. It was buzzing around 8 p.m. Cashless, right? Cashless. Now accepting Bitcoin. And they had a sign, now accepting Bitcoin. 4 or 5 years ago, this was a little bit of a Bitcoin maximalist dream that, you'll be paying with Bitcoin, you'll be using just Bitcoin, that's it. And now you're slowly finding that retail shops are adopting this. And it's like the next Bretton Woods. I don't know if you're seeing this in the stores around you, but it does make you feel like I got to jump in this, or else are we going to be left behind? Like,
people to accept this as a bridge to the new system. And not only is that happening here in the United States, but some institutions are using what's called a spare change in Bitcoin investment. I think it's a scheme in a lot of ways here to get people to accept crypto and Bitcoin here. For example, you go to your bank, and some banks are already doing this. You go to your bank, you deposit a check for $100.59. They say to you, hey, would you like to take that 59 cents and invest that in Bitcoin? And people are going, wow, well, you know what? Well, why not? Look at Bitcoin. It's going up like crazy. So this is a way that it's methodical, and it's almost diabolic in many ways how they're doing it. They're easing people slowly into the system here, getting them to accept it. And I think they're going to pull it off, obviously, and be very successful in the bridge to this mechanism of building the bridge started way before the presidential selection. I don't think we had an election here in the United States. You probably know my take on this. I think it's all a game. But anyway, and then, I really believe that the main two reasons why Trump was chosen here or selected not by the people, but by those that pull the strings, is to issue in the new system here to bridge us and to bring about negative rates moving forward here, which is obviously going to destroy everything. But they're going to come up with scapegoats. But going back to we're going to see a lot more of that. There are car dealers out here. In fact, I was by a BMW dealership recently and say you can buy your car with Bitcoin. So they're accepting Bitcoin to buy cars now and everything else. And they're not the only ones. I think Cadillac even has a program with regard to that. All the big name cars manufacturers, maybe I would be willing to bet. In fact, we know for a fact Tesla will accept Bitcoin as well. And so they're already doing it. And look, man, I think people are uncomfortable with it right now, but more people are going to become comfortable with it, and that's part of the mechanism. Now, here in the United States, we're seeing a big move to deregulate the banks and merge them with cryptocurrencies, and we're going to see this to a big degree moving forward as part of the easing people into accepting the system, which they didn't vote for and didn't want, but there's no pushback. I don't know what it's like over by you, but I can tell you this: people in the United States, they are sheep, and they've been dumbed down. They've been fully indoctrinated. They drank a lot of the Kool-Aid, and it's always the same story. And then they're going to sit back and wonder why things didn't go the way they wanted, because it's a game of politics. And it's people are too easily duped and manipulated. They've lost their ability to question anything. They don't ask why. They just follow along. I don't know if that's like that by you, but it certainly is here.
Yeah, it's very similar. The sentiment and the mentality of the people is very similar. We've received a lot of immigrants from countries that overall have are used. They were born into a very autocratic system. So to them, rebelling against establishment is something that is contrary to their cultural norms, and that's why we're seeing here in
Very
Europe.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, we're
Very
seeing
interesting. Good.
so many countries in Europe are fighting back because that's historical, and your roots are also European. I know we talked about last time, but in Europe, people have this homogenous stance where it's easier for them to fight back the government. We've seen so many countries, so many governments lose, right, the popular support. France, we're seeing what's happening in Romania. We've seen a lot of protests even in Georgia, protests in Britain with the whole scandal that emerged there with and it just shows you that there are parts of the world where they're fighting the World Economic Forum, the EU, socialist agendas. But here in North America, we're still, like you said, majorly duped, perceiving that, we're going to experience the true capitalist era. We're going to see a Reagan 2.0, right? We're going to see a huge boom in all these industries, but you look around and I'm not seeing a boom when I'm out with the people. I'm not seeing people spending. I'm not seeing people walking around even smiling, right? And I think that the divide now has just, it's gotten so massively, it's been so distorted massively now that I wouldn't be surprised if we would see some protests coming along or some volatility, something where people would finally revolt or push back at least against all these things. I think we're at a tipping point. I know that here in North America, like you said, we are majorly duped, and we're more of we follow this busy bee kind of mentality, or this herd where we just line up. But yeah, it's definitely intriguing times. I mean, historians going to look back and wonder. We had this opportunity.
What were they thinking? Honestly, look, what we're seeing now. We've been foretold that this would eventually happen here, and it looks like it's really unfolding in that way. And there are some people like you and me, and the people that follow work, that are able to see through this and are actually taking action against what's happening here. However, whatever that may be, but look, I just can't see, especially with the current situation here in the United States, where people have become drones, brainwashed, psyoped, Kool-Aid drinking zombies, that are easily taken advantage of, easily manipulated, and then they're going to be duped. And I'm telling people, I just started yesterday saying that start looking and listening for the setup. It's the fault of this why the economy is doing bad. It's the fault of this why we're seeing inflation, because it can't be the administration coming in, and there will be no finger pointing at the central bank at all. All we're going to see, unfortunately, here in the United States is Trump work more closely with the Federal Reserve to inflate, to allow the system to inflate, to allow the Fed to cut rates further, which is the last thing that we need. We need a gain of purchasing power here. We're going to see much higher inflation around the world. And people don't even understand that it's not that prices are rising. And that's another thing we're going to see is scarcity. I think we're going to see a scarcity of resources moving forward, supply chain disruptions as well. And with regard to all the dynamics in play, look, it's pretty obvious to me that if people don't start taking action, and I hope they do, like you said, with protest, whatever, maybe that'll change things, although I don't think they're going to be big enough. There's not enough. I mean, you could look at, for example, the collective following of truthers like you and me. It's infinitesimal compared to, let's say, the entertainment industry, people eating Tide Pods, licking toilet bowls. They got millions of followers. You and me, we got to struggle here to allow people to see the light. And the light, people don't like it. They hear the truth. They don't accept it. Because they've been duped since day one. And when it's easier for them to accept the lies and even being lied to, than to accept the truth here. And unfortunately, I think that's something else we're going to see more so moving forward.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm also looking at the political alignment here in Canada. We're seeing that finally Trudeau has announced his his departure. We're all very sad.
Canadian people, man. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was a long time coming. But it's interesting to see that as soon as Trump, and that's why politics is such a, like you always say, politrick. It's so funny because as soon as Trump is elected, all of a sudden now we're seeing the emergence of the Conservative Party here in Canada, and the next puppet who's going to be chosen, selected. Um, we're definitely going through interesting times, but you touched on something very important: scarcity. And I hope that people who are listening do prepare for the unexpected, because I think since the last time when Trump was in the office, sure, no war broke out like we said, but COVID was a bit of a biological warfare. So who knows what else is in the cards? It's like he has this he's the chosen one to bring in some chaos.
Interesting that you brought that up. Absolutely, this was biological warfare. Warp speed usher this in. With regard to Trump and kinetic action or war, his job was to rebuild the military so it can be utilized as it is now. We had a very weak military at that point here. But absolutely, that was a war. It's always a war against the people. They don't see it that way. They think because he wasn't the one that mandated it, he's not responsible for the mass.
Yeah,
we got to be careful here what we say. How do I say this? Whatever, you know what I'm talking about. Because if they'll take down the video. You know what I mean? They won't allow people to hear this stuff. But yeah, absolutely. He's taking full credit for that. He's the father of it. He's admitted this. He hasn't gotten enough credit. Face value, $3.6 trillion it cost to finance that whole thing here, shutting down the economy, causing small businesses to get wiped out. The large businesses here who have the cash to survive as the Fed was allowed to vastly inflate. I mean, it's an incredible thing to see, but absolutely biological warfare, 100%. And who knows? They're not done. They're going to pull something else off very, very large. Whether they already have the burning down states here as a mechanism to inflate. People are already being told here in the United States there's going to be a federal or a government bailout. Meanwhile, they're not being told that these insurers are backed by these the credit default swaps that they have sold to the Wall Street institutions here to mitigate risk. But the people are going to be responsible. There's no doubt about it. Anyway, it's so interesting to see. And people, they don't hold people who are on this side of politics, and say in this case Trump, don't see that as a biological war. That a weapon was created. He created it. And then, of course, it was massively dispersed by the Biden creature, Stein. I have a lot of names for Biden. Mummy man, vomitous mass. I mean, I've come up. I have. This is a coping mechanism for me. You probably know that, but I have to do it. It helps me. It helps me just, I don't know, get my head around it all. But yeah, man, absolutely, you're dead on. You're so spot on with this, and absolutely, this is what we're going to see, and it's going to be interesting to see the public reaction, and what they're going to do is, and the people let's say that can't see what's clear is they're going to blame everything else, and it's being set up. As I said, they're going to set it up. Well, it's the fault of this. It's the fault of that. It's all a deception. It's distraction. I refuse to participate in this anymore. To me, it becomes more clear every year that I get older that it's nothing but devilism, man. I don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah, and a lot of dark things have emerged as of late, and of course, there's always that Mandela effect. I don't know if you're familiar with that, where a well-known fact becomes just sort of whitewashed. And
absolutely, I mean, that's huge. I'm happy you brought that up. And but I mean, it's a method of what of manipulation. I don't know how you would word it, but something along those lines.
Yeah, exactly. And for instance, just what came to mind was that podcast of Mark Zuckerberg trying to throw shade and all the blame, the Biden administration. force me to do X, Y, Z to everybody who was posting about things that were proven now, true. um, and I think we're going to see a lot of that, where we're going to have this cloud, this perception that the truth is coming out. Finally, Trump is one of ours, and he's draining the swamp, right? That was a previous expression that he was using. But you see there's more of this neocon agenda. And Syria, speaking of neocon agenda, Syria happened since we last had this podcast. The collapse of Syria was on the list of the project for the new American century, right? So we see that this is well orchestrated in advance, decades and decades ago, and we're just now witnessing this. And yeah, very, very interesting times. I hope people are prepared, because like you said, the battle is on different fronts. It's a spiritual front.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you bring it up all the time. That's something that I've appreciated on your daily show, is that you talk about the spiritual warfare that is going on, and we see it. We see it. And I'm really concerned when you see people who are being duped into these schemes, because the devil is a grand deceiver, right? He works tirelessly to deceive. So we're seeing this. Is there anything else you want to touch on? Something, I know there are a lot of news, a lot of topics. Every day seems like a race, but anything that we didn't touch on that you think is pertinent for the viewers?
What you just said, people are being pulled further and further away from the source, all right, the source, the Almighty. And I really do believe that this is a spiritual war that's going on here. But people, again, are putting their faith in devilism. This is politics, politicians, and they're being duped. They were warned. I mean, they talk about, let's say, the Bible. Okay, they talk about, but it's been foretold to you, if you believe that, what is there in the book. But meanwhile, they don't see it for themselves. Most of the people here, by and large, are Christian people who are believing that Trump is some kind of a savior deity. And the man is participating in, again, a devilism system, and they don't see it. They're so easily manipulated, even though they've been warned and they've been told to watch for, wolves in sheep's clothing and things like that. They just don't see it. They've been blinded. Unfortunately, they don't think. And it's eventually, is going to lead to their downfall, and it is already. And I think that these people are going to suffer the most moving forward. They're going to lose faith. It's a way for them to lose their connection. They already are, by not putting their full faith, and they say they are, but they're not. They're picking this person or that person or this group of people to change things, instead of, like, again, pulling them further and further away from the source. And that's a problem. I think that's a problem. Some people are going to think that, you and I, we're crazy here, but that we're allowed, that's our thing. We're allowed to believe what we want here. And I have to say that in my personal life, the God always comes first. And I think it's played out very, very well for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, we have seen the emergence of religious wars, right, between what has taken place in the Middle East. And yeah, I do feel that Christians are the ones that are being targeted quite a bit in terms of the whole perception. You're seeing they're trying to decide who's right. Who's right? The Zionists, the pro-Israelis are right, or those who are pro-Islam, are they right? All these groups who are seen as like rebel groups, pushing the resistance. Yeah, very, very dividing times, and it's. I think that's one thing that we can look back on is the Albert Pike figure, who once stated that this is potentially the next great war, right, before the emergence of perhaps an ecumenistic religion, which will be like a one world religion. Because you do see that the two ends are kind of bridging together. Like, I'll give you an example now with China and the US. We're hearing a lot of potential tensions, but they all meet together. They all dine, they all drink together, and it shows that psychopathic tendency that they have, or perhaps or sociopathic tendency where they're all together, they're smiling. It's that mask, right? And here we are believing these narratives that the U.S. is gonna go and do this, or like Europe is gonna do this and that, and Ukraine is fighting Russia, and it is a perception war. It is a perception war. Yeah, yeah.
Everything is always perception, and I think that's the thing is that the perception is so distorted across the spectrum. I mean, of everything they've lost on a lot of core issues, and that really is the main that we're seeing here. Well, with regard to the United States, and the bottom line is we've lost our place here in many ways here across the board, and from an economic standpoint, we're being shunned. No one wants our products. No one wants our dollar. Quite obviously, who would? We are our number one. We have two export products here in the United States, and I don't know which one comes first. Number one, it's propaganda, and number two, it's inflation. And the Fed, by killing the dollar, you're having the world reserve currency. The world's frankly sick of it. And people don't want to even hold, not even American citizens want to hold dollars anymore, even though they're being duped into, the dollar is really strong. But people get it. They go to the store and things keep rising in price, and they don't understand the mechanism behind it. And they're not, and because maybe they don't understand it, they don't push back. And they're hoping that this is going to change because we're going to make America great again. There's no way this is happening, unfortunately. And they've been duped. People were sold the same set of lies that they were sold last time. Yeah. And the fact that they saw inflation under Biden, they obviously blame him. The fact of the matter is, it's the issue of the lag of in economics and finance here of the currency making its way through the economy, all the debt creation under Obama and then Trump, obviously, and then Biden here. It's now starting to rear its ugly head, and we haven't seen anything yet. And we have central banks who continue to inflate. They could stop inflation in its tracks, contract the money supply, vastly increase rates would, of course, destroy the stock market and wouldn't enrich those 1% and 2%, but it would help we the people. But that mechanism is not going to stop. We've already been promised by President-elect Trump that we're going to get lower rates, something he can't deliver. And that should bother people.
Do you think we'll go negative, Greg? Do you think that this?
I think they're looking for an excuse to do it, yeah. I think as the economy contracts faster, the setup is already there. You're going to hear calls from President-elect Trump to lower rates to negative like he did last time. He called the Federal Reserve boneheads for not doing it. The Fed said, we will lower rates when appropriate. They're going to do the same thing now. People are going to think that Trump is fighting against the Fed. Meanwhile, he's playing with them to dupe people into this environment of negative rates. I really believe he was chosen for two reasons, selected. Negative rate environment, and to bridge us into the new system. It's pretty freaking obvious. The rest of it is just all just nonsense and garbage and distractions and deceptions. That's all it is, period.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, let's see what the next few months will bring again. It seems that since last time we spoke in September, all these crazy things erupted. But thank you so much for your guidance. I really appreciate your shows. Again, everybody, subscribe to Gregory Mannarino if you haven't already. One tool that is just the absolute cheat code is your MMRI. And ever since I discovered it a few years back, it's always like playing on the background. Like behind me, I have the 10-year, and I always have your website on. And yeah, it is interesting. But like you said, we should prepare. And always be just aware because the enemy is fighting tirelessly. And yeah, I appreciate you, Gregory, and hopefully I'll see you in the next few months again.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Great chat. Thank you.